Hi, from the All Brands booth at Quilt Festival. I'm Heather Banks, one of your Brother Educators, and in this session, I'll be demonstrating the ScanNCut SDX225F. Stay with me and I'll show you how this machine can take your sewing, embroidery, and crafting to the next level. Today I'll be talking about the ScanNCut SDX225F, a dealer-exclusive ScanNCut model from Brother. This is an electronic cutting machine with a scanner all in one, and you can get started using it right out of the box. The 225F comes with two different mats, the standard mat and the fabric mat, as well as two additional blades and a variety of accessories. It comes with a standard black auto blade, the thin fabric auto blade, two erasable markers for fabric, and an assortment of colored markers. Additionally, it comes with a starter fabric project for making keychains. Everything needed to create these keychains is included in the box, so you can get started creating them as soon as you get it out and start working. If you've ever wanted to cut fabric with a ScanNCut, this may be the perfect model for you. With this beautiful 5-inch full color display, you can create and edit designs very simply and easily. And one of my favorite things is that it's a standalone model. There is no need for software or a computer. Let's take a look at some of the shapes and patterns that are built into the machine. There are over 1,300 designs built directly into the ScanNCut SDX225. As you can see, there is a wide variety of patterns to choose from. And these patterns can be used for anything from card making to cutting cork to cutting fabric appliques. You'll find shapes for the holidays, for animals, designs perfect for kids, weddings, and of course, that's not including all of the images that you can bring into the machine using the scanner. Let's take a closer look at the quilting category. There are 140 quilt blocks built into the ScanNCut. Imagine cutting intricate quilt designs with the accuracy of a ScanNCut blade. There's really not much to it. All you have to do is select a pattern and then edit it to the size of your choice, place it on the mat and cut. Let's walk through how we might cut part of a block out. You can see here that each piece is differentiated. By clicking on it, I can see how many pieces will be in the block and which one it's referring to. If I click on this option at the end, then all of the parts at one time will be placed on the mat. Let's just choose one. Let's choose the corner triangles. We'll place them on the mat and we can move them around at this point. You'll notice that there is a line inside of the outline. Let me show you why. The ScanNCut will automatically place a seam allowance inside. We can change the width of the seam allowance. As you can see here, it will default to the 1/4 inch. And with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, we can draw it onto our fabric. Let's go ahead and start out just by cutting out these triangles so you can see how easy it is to cut out your quilting pieces. I just have a piece of plain fabric here. There isn't anything on the back like a fusible. This is just 100% cotton. Let's load the mat into the machine. It's not difficult. Simply place one hand at the top and then use your other hand to press the load button. It should slide in very slowly and easily, just like you see here. Next, we're going to add our blade. We're using the thin fabric auto blade because this is a thin fabric without a backing, and we're also using the fabric mat. Adding the blade isn't difficult. Just drop it in and lower the lever to lock it into place. Okay, let me show you this. This is the background scan feature, and it's something that makes the ScanNCut completely unique from other machines on the market. You can see that the mat is being scanned back and forth into the machine. The machine is capturing an image of the material on the mat, and this image will show up on the screen. This will allow us to use any size of fabric on the mat. Okay, you can see our image on the screen. Just drag your shape over on top of the fabric. You can fussy cut, figure out exactly where you want it. Then we'll press OK and we'll tell the machine what to do. We're going to be cutting it out in this instance. We always recommend doing a test cut the first time you're cutting a material. And here I'm just choosing from the shapes in the menu, and I'll use a circle. Now I need to get that circle over onto my fabric, just a piece that I won't be using. So I'm going to move it over here down to the bottom using these arrows. This is just a small test cut. It will tell me that my blade depth is correct for this material. Okay, so you can see here that the blade is moving down to that corner and cutting a small circle from the corner of the fabric. Now we've peeled back the fabric and you can see that's a perfect circle. It did a great job, so I'm ready to start cutting out my project. Now we're moving on to the triangles. It measures the depth of the mat and then it knows how deep to cut. This is our auto blade technology. There's no dialing in a depth for the blade or needing to tell a separate program how far to cut. Okay, let's peel back our fabric and see how we did. I'm liking the way this looks. Perfect triangles. Notice the dog ears. If you're a quilter, the dog ears are cut off the ends of the triangle to make lining them up for sewing so much easier. Now I'm just gently lifting them away, and you can see that I got perfect triangles ready to use in my quilt block. Now, what if I wanted to draw in those seam allowances I showed you earlier? I'm going to go ahead and put in my water erasable marker that is included with a ScanNCut and drop it into the blade holder. Next, I'm going to load a piece of fabric. Now, this fabric is wrong side up in this case because I want to be able to see my seam allowances as I sew my block together. Once again, we're going to use that background scan. It's so important for being able to place your materials directly over the fabric. You don't have to worry about accidentally having your shape in the wrong place or needing to use a piece of fabric that's as big as the mat. Simply use the right size for you. You can use your scraps this way because you know you'll be able to drag your material over on top. Now here I just darkened the background because I used a lighter fabric. And again, I'm just dragging my shapes over them. But instead of cutting, we're going to go ahead and do the drawing of the seam allowances. So we're going to press OK and then go to, instead of cut, we will choose draw. Perfect. Now we'll press start and the machine will begin drawing out our seam allowances. In this case, we used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can see that blue very clearly. And that is perfect. That's our seam allowance. Now we're ready to do the actual cutting. So I'm not going to move the fabric or change anything. I'll simply press finish, go back to select and press cut. And now the machine understands the difference and we'll be able to cut out our triangles just like we did before, but this time we added a seam allowance. As I mentioned before, this machine has auto blade technology, so it is automatically extending the depth of the blade as much as needed to cut this piece of cotton. Were it a piece of foam or cork, it would extend it the appropriate amount as well. That's one of the really wonderful features about this machine. As we peel away our fabric, you can see that we have the same shape. The dog ears are cut off the edges of the triangle, but in this case, we are looking at the wrong side of the fabric, and we are looking at the blue 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now you notice I'm gently taking this off the mat because I don't want the fabric to fray. But here you go. This is a really nice close-up of the wrong side of the fabric with the wash away seam allowances. Here are some examples of blocks that I have made using the built-in quilt blocks in the ScanNCut. Here's a fun quilt made using circles cut on the ScanNCut. Once again, using that background scan, we were able to move the circles directly over the fabric squares. Once the circles were cut out, it was simply a matter of sewing them onto some background squares, then assembling them into a small quilt. But this is just an example of how you can use shapes in the ScanNCut to create quilts or really any project. Let's talk more about Brother's Auto Blade technology. The ScanNCut can cut materials up to 3 millimeters thick, and here you can see an example of 2 pieces of cork that have been fused together being cut. As we remove it from the mat, you'll be able to see that it did a fabulous job cutting out all corners, and we can even pop out the tiny little circle at the center, and it did an equally great job cutting out that as well. We've looked at fabric without a backing, but let's look at one with a fusible backing. In this case, I'm using the standard black top auto blade, and you can clearly see that this piece of fabric has a fusible on the back, and I am laying it with the fusible side down, and I'm going to throw away the paper. Now here's a simple shape that I'm cutting in the ScanNCut. Again, the blade is testing the depth of the fabric against the mat. So the auto blade technology does not require you to dial in a blade depth at any place. This is a standalone machine, and it can figure out the depth of your material all on its own. As we peel away the fabric, you can see that it is a perfect cut, and I'm able to remove the fusible backing from the mat. It would now be ready to fuse to any project really for applique. Let's change gears and look at something totally different. Vinyl is such a popular medium today, whether it's heat transfer vinyl or craft vinyl. I have craft vinyl here on my mat in the machine, and craft vinyl is something like a sticker with a paper backing on it. We're going to choose a design, and again, I mentioned we have a lot of holiday designs, so let's look at something Halloween themed. We'll choose the witch for this particular project. You can change the size and make any alterations to it. Now I'll set this down onto my mat. Again, here is that background scan, so very important. I'm just using a very small piece of craft vinyl, and if I didn't have the ability to scan, I wouldn't know where to put the witch on the mat. I would probably have to waste a lot of vinyl in order to make sure that the entire mat was covered. But here you can see I'm just going to drag my witch design over on top of my vinyl and press cut. Now before we continue, there's one very small but important difference that we need to do. The ScanNCut SDX225 has a feature called half cut. When we turn on the half cut setting, this means that the blade will automatically only cut through half of our material. This would only be used really with vinyl. You always have a carrier sheet or a paper backing with vinyl, and you don't want to cut through that. In the past with other machines, you may have to try to dial in a number and determine exactly how much the blade should extend. However, with the ScanNCut DX and this 225, the blade will determine that all on its own, which is a pretty amazing feature. Right now you can see that it's cutting, and then we will remove it from the mat, and you'll be able to see that the paper backing will be completely intact. Notice as I turn the paper over, there are no cut marks. The blade did not extend past the vinyl. I slowly peel away the top layer of vinyl to reveal the design that's been cut as well as the paper backing. You can see how beautifully this has been cut, and the back of my paper is completely intact. There we go. It did a great job. I'm ready to put it on my project. You may be wondering what some of the other features are you might use the scanner for. Here's an example of handwriting that I've placed on a piece of cardstock. I want to be able to cut this out, but I want the outside of my design to be recognized. The ScanNCut can definitely do this. We're going to go ahead and scan it into the machine using a feature called Direct Cut. Once it's done scanning, the design will appear on the screen and we can crop it. After that, all we have to do is cut it out. So here I'll press cut and then we'll give the machine a minute to process it. As I said, we're only cutting cardstock in this example, but you could use this with really any different designs you may have. Let's lift that up off of the mat and you can see what a beautiful job the ScanNCut did, recognizing the outline of my design and cutting it. Another great feature of the ScanNCut DX is its ability to read embroidery files. If you applique, this is going to be great for you, but there are other uses for this as well. It can read your PES files in addition to your Luminaire or Dream Machine files, as well as the Stellaire. This includes PES, PHC, and PHX files. Let's pull up a few examples of embroidery designs. Here's a design that came over from the Luminaire as a PHX file. You can see it looks just like it would in the Luminaire. If I press the flower button, then I'm given the option to bring it onto the screen. In this case, it's not an applique, but I do have other options. I could draw it, emboss it, or even foil it. There was no conversion required to bring this embroidery design over from the embroidery machine to the ScanNCut, and you can see that it came over with all of the detail it had as an embroidery design. Let's open another embroidery design. In this case, this design will be an applique. This will be a quilt block. However, this design is an embroidery design that was built into the Luminaire. If I push the flower button, I'm again given the same options. I can break this down into its individual pieces and cut out each one individually. Here it is as the finished design, which again could be drawn. But since it's an applique, I wanted to cut out the individual pieces to be turned into my finished embroidery design. Let's look at one more example. We'll pull another embroidery design, this one again from the Luminaire. If I go into the B pocket in the ScanNCut, I'll find the other two designs that we've already worked with, plus a new one. This floral design has an applique already built in. So I'll go ahead and press set, and then this is the flower that I want to cut out for my applique. Again, no conversion was required. All I did was plug it straight into the ScanNCut and pulled up the embroidery design. Here are a few examples of what I've done with this. First off, I've stitched it out as indicated. It's an applique. Here I've drawn it. Here's an example where I've foiled the embroidery design, and here is an embossed embroidery design. Imagine doing this with your embroidery designs when paired with a ScanNCut. Another great feature is the auto layout feature. Let's go ahead and choose a design. We'll put a flower applique on the mat, something that comes directly out of the quilt applique category. If you scroll down, you'll see there are a lot of applique designs. We're just going to use this simple flower. Now I have a lot of petals to cut, and I want to make sure that I conserve as much fabric as possible. Let's ungroup this flower so that I can move those petals out and we can use the auto layout feature. If I go into here, I can ungroup, and this will allow me to pull each of those petals out. Now, what can I do to make those petals be in a position to cut with the least amount of fabric? I'm going to go ahead and use auto layout. You can see there are 3 choices. Each one will give you a slightly different direction of the petals. So just playing around with each one will let you see which way you'd prefer to go. Here I've already cut out my petals, and I'm peeling away my piece of fusible backed wool. They were cut beautifully and perfectly. I even did a test cut. From there, the petals were positioned onto a piece of fabric and sewn into a pillow. There really is so much you can do with a ScanNCut. Check out All Brand's amazing prices this week, and thank you for joining me.